Earth warned the galaxy to back off and they didn't listen. Now humanity fights without rules. There was a place in deep space, far from any charted trade route, far from any known military patrol zone, far from any telescope or scanner array operated by any alien species, where nothing appeared to exist. On every galactic map, it was marked the same way all empty regions of space were marked: blank, quiet, unimportant. For 30 years, every alien astronomer, every military intelligence analyst, every deep space exploration team had looked in the direction of that region and seen exactly what they expected to see. Nothing. That was exactly what humanity had intended. Fleet 2 had been built over 30 years in complete secrecy, not hidden on Earth, not hidden in any human colony or space station where foreign intelligence services might eventually find a record of it. It was built in deep space itself, in that blank, quiet, unimportant region that nobody ever looked at twice. Components were transported in small shipments disguised as mining equipment, civilian cargo, and scientific research materials. The construction happened slowly and carefully, piece by piece, over 3 decades. The engineers and workers who built it lived aboard construction platforms for years at a time, completely cut off from regular communication channels. Every record of its existence was classified, at the highest possible level, known only to a small group of Earth's most senior military, commanders and government leaders. The reason for all this secrecy was not aggression. It was not preparation for conquest. It was something simpler and more human than either of those things. It was the lesson that 10,000 years of warfare had written so deeply into humanity's collective understanding that no generation had ever been able to forget it. No matter how long the peace lasted, hope for the best. Prepare for everything else. Fleet 2 was not built to start wars. It was built to end them, absolutely and completely, if the day ever came when Earth had no other choice. It was humanity's last resort, the final card that no one was supposed to know existed, the answer to the question that no enemy was ever supposed to be foolish enough to force them to answer. When Admiral Cole gave the order to activate Fleet 2, the command went through 7 layers of encrypted authorization, each one requiring a separate senior officer's confirmation, before it was finally transmitted to the deep space coordinates where the fleet had been waiting in silence for years. The ships powered up one by one, and as they did, their combined energy output began to register on scanners across the galaxy. At first it was just a faint reading, strange, unexplained, easy to dismiss as sensor noise. Then it grew stronger and stronger, and then all at once every scanner array on every Vreth ship, every Sorun station, every Marin military outpost, every Drivathi monitoring platform lit up simultaneously with the same reading. A fleet. An enormous fleet, appearing from nowhere in a region of space that had shown nothing for as long as records existed. The Cathali scientist who had spoken about humanity weeks earlier was at her station when the data came in. She stared at her screen. She checked the readings 3 times, manually because she did not trust the automated systems to be reporting correctly. Then she stood up very slowly from her chair and turned to face her colleagues in the monitoring room. And her expression was one they had never seen on her calm, measured face before. "That fleet," she said carefully, "is larger than the entire Vreth Armada. It is larger than the combined military forces of every species currently allied against Earth." She paused. The room was completely silent. It did not appear from hyperspace. It was already there. It has been there for a very long time. We simply could not see it. Another pause. Which means they built it without any of us knowing. Which means everything we thought we knew about the limits of human military capacity, every assessment, every analysis, every intelligence report was based on what they chose to show us. She sat back down slowly. We have been watching the wrong fleet this entire time. The effect on the Vreth-led alliance was immediate and devastating, and it happened without a single shot being fired. The Sorun Collective was the first to break. Their council met an emergency session within hours of Fleet 2's appearance on scanners and reached a unanimous decision in less than 40 minutes. They had joined the alliance because the Vreth had pressured them and because they had calculated, based on every piece of intelligence they had, that Earth could not withstand a coordinated 4-way assault. That calculation was now completely wrong, and the Sorun were practical people above all else. They sent a private encrypted message to Earth before the day was over. The message was long and full of careful diplomatic language, but its meaning was simple. They had been coerced. They had always respected humanity. They wanted no part of this conflict. They were stepping back. The Marin Alliance followed within 18 hours. Their message was shorter and less carefully worded, almost rushed, because their political leadership was under enormous internal pressure from their own people, who had been watching the Ghost, war with growing unease and had no desire to be, drawn into a direct confrontation with a species that had just revealed a hidden fleet the size of, which had never been seen in galactic history. They expressed regret. They expressed respect. They asked for peace. The Dravathi kingdom lasted slightly longer, 31 hours after Fleet 2 appeared, before sending their own communication to Earth. They did not express regret. They did not express respect. They simply stated in very plain and direct language that they considered the alliance with the Vreth to have been a strategic error, and that they were withdrawing from it immediately. It was the most honest of the three messages, and in a strange way, Admiral Cole appreciated it the most. In less than 2 days, without firing a single weapon at a single target, humanity had dismantled the coalition that had threatened to destroy Earth. The Vreth Empire now stood alone, stripped of its allies, running low on fuel and supplies after months of the Ghost War, its communication networks full of gaps where relay stations used to be, its commanders exhausted and frustrated and genuinely uncertain for the first time in generations, and surrounding their home system, every exit route, every possible escape path, every jump point way, was the combined force of Fleet 1 and Fleet 2. Hundreds of human warships, silent, dark, patient, going nowhere. The Vreth Emperor had never spoken directly to a human being before. In 50 years of Galactic Council meetings and diplomatic exchanges, he had always worked through ambassadors and intermediaries. Humans were beneath his personal attention. They always had been. He spoke to Admiral Cole directly now. The communication channel opened and the Emperor's face appeared on the bridge screen, older than Cole had imagined, with deep lines in his gray skin and eyes that had once held absolute certainty, and now held something much more complicated. He looked at the human admiral surrounded by his bridge crew, and he was quiet for a moment, as if he was still trying to find the version of this conversation where the Vreth Empire came out with something intact. "Admiral Cole," he said finally. His voice was still proud. The pride was the last thing to go, Cole suspected, and maybe it would never fully leave. "What do you want?" "We will discuss territory, resources, political concessions, trade agreements. Name what you want and we will negotiate in good faith." Cole looked at the Emperor for a long moment without speaking. When he finally did speak, his voice was quiet and completely even. Not angry, not triumphant, not cold. Just honest. "We don't want your territory," he said. "We have enough. We don't want your resources. We have enough of those too. We don't want political concessions or trade agreements." A pause. "What we want is something you cannot put in a document or sign at a table. What we want is for this to never happen again, to us or to anyone else that this council has spent 50 years laughing at." The Emperor's expression shifted slightly. "Then what are your terms?" Cole took a slow breath. He had thought about this moment for months, since before the fleet went dark, since before the first strike, since the night he opened the file. He had thought about what he would say if this day ever came, and he had decided long ago that he was not going to be complicated about it. "My terms are a message," he said, "not to you specifically. To everyone. To every species in this galaxy who watched Proxima Station burn and said nothing. To every council member who laughed when Alara Voss said we were deciding how much of ourselves to show you." He leaned forward slightly. "Humanity sat at your table for 200 years, quiet, careful, following every rule, even the unfair ones. We did that because we believed in the idea of the Union, because we wanted to be part of something bigger than ourselves, because we hoped that peace was worth the patience it cost." He paused. "We warned you. We always warn first. That is something every human commander learns before anything else. You warn first. You give the other side the chance to choose differently. We warned you at the council table 50 years ago when we joined. We warned you every time we chose not to respond to insults and dismissals. Commander Voss warned you the day she said we were deciding how much of ourselves to show you. His voice dropped lower, and the bridge around him was so quiet that his words seemed to fill every corner of it. You have now seen 30% of what humanity is capable of. Maybe not even that. Fleet 2 has not fired a single weapon. The tactics we used in the Ghost War are not our most advanced tactics. Everything you experienced in the last several months, every strike, every disappearing fleet, every target we hit in the heart of your territory, that was us being restrained. Still restrained, even after Proxima. Even then. He let that sit for a moment. If any species, ever again destroys a human settlement, kills human civilians and sends a message asking what we will do, we will not spend 72 hours in silence. We will not give 3 months to a ghost war. We will not negotiate. We will not send a junior officer to a meeting. His eyes stayed steady on the Emperor's face. There will be no warning next time. Because we gave you the warning this time, and you chose not to listen to it, the Emperor said nothing. For a long moment the channel was completely silent. Then Cole leaned back and said, quietly, almost gently, "Go home, rebuild, and remember this. Conversation every time someone at your council table suggests testing us again." He closed the channel. The emergency session of the Galactic Union Council that followed was the most attended in the organization's 400-year history. Every species sent representatives. The chamber was so full that additional screens had to be set up in hallways and adjacent rooms so that overflow delegations could follow the proceedings. Every word was being broadcast live across the galaxy, on diplomatic channels, on civilian news networks, on military communication systems. The Vreth ambassador's chair was empty. Commander Ilara Voss, the same human ambassador who had been laughed at 50 years ago and again in the months before this conflict, sat at the far end of the table. She sat the same way she always had, calm, still, watching. The Cathali ambassador, an elderly diplomat named Sura Ven, who had served on the council for 40 years, stood up to speak. She was known throughout the galaxy as one of the most careful and measured voices in galactic politics. She chose every word with great deliberation, and she never said more than she meant. She was quiet for a moment after she stood. She looked around the room at every face, every species, every representative who had been part of the Union that had watched Proxima Station burn, and largely stayed silent. "We have made a mistake," she said. "Not a political mistake, not a diplomatic error, a fundamental mistake in understanding." She paused. "For 50 years we looked at humanity and saw their fleet size and their territory and their quiet behavior at this table. And we decided, without ever seriously questioning the decision, that they were a minor power. A primitive species, harmless." She looked down at the table for a moment. "We never asked why they were quiet. We never considered that patience and restraint are not the same thing as weakness. We never looked at their history, their real history, the full 10,000 years of it, and asked what kind of species survives that kind of existence and still chooses to pursue peace." She looked up again. "The answer is, a species that is very, very serious about the choice, because they know better than any of us what the alternative costs." The chamber was completely silent. "Today we have been given an education. It was an expensive education, paid for by a colony of 12,000 people who deserved to live, and by a war that did not need to happen." Her voice was steady, but there was something underneath it. Not quite grief, but something close. "I believe we should be grateful that the education ended here. I believe we should spend a very long time thinking about why a species that could have done far more chose not to." She sat down. Ilara Voss at the far end of the table said nothing. She simply nodded once, small and quiet, and looked back down at the papers in front of her. Admiral Jonah Cole came home to Earth 6 weeks after the council session. His ship landed at a military base outside the city, and he walked out into the gray morning light with a single bag over his shoulder, the same way he had left months ago. There was no ceremony planned. He had asked for that specifically. A small group of officers met him on the landing platform. They saluted. He returned it. They exchanged a few quiet words about logistics and post-mission briefings, and the long process of standing fleets down and returning ships to their regular positions. Practical things. The kind of conversation that follows the end of something large and difficult and necessary. When the officers left, Cole stood alone on the platform for a moment. The sky above was overcast, soft white-gray clouds covering the sun. Somewhere in the city nearby he could hear ordinary morning sounds. Traffic, a distant siren, birds. His niece found him there. She was 12 years old, his brother's daughter, and she had been staying with family in the city while the conflict ran its course. She came running across the platform in a jacket that was slightly too big for her dark hair loose and moving in the wind, and she grabbed his hand with both of hers and looked up at him with the particular intensity that children bring to questions they have been waiting a long time to ask. "Uncle Jonah, did we win?" He looked down at her face, open and young and completely certain that there was a clean answer to that question. He thought about how to explain to someone that young what winning and losing meant in a conflict like this one. He thought about the photograph in his desk drawer. He thought about Proxima Station. He thought about the Vreth Emperor's face on that screen, the last of the pride still there even at the end. He crouched down to her level and put a hand on her shoulder. "We protected our people," he said, "and we made sure it won't happen again." He looked at her for a moment. That's all war should ever be. Protecting the people you love and making sure you don't have to do it again. She thought about this seriously, the way children do when they decide to take an answer on its merits rather than pushing for a simpler one. Then she nodded, apparently satisfied, and held onto his hand as they walked off the platform together toward the waiting cars. Cole looked up at the sky once as they walked. Past the clouds, past the layers of atmosphere, past all of it, were the stars. Still and distant and completely unchanged by everything that had happened beneath them. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was having a very long and very uncomfortable conversation with itself. New policies were being written. Old assumptions were being discarded. Species that had spent generations dismissing humanity were spending very quiet evenings looking at newly updated intelligence files and feeling the particular chill that comes from realizing you almost made a much worse mistake than you did, and humanity's fleets were moving back to their regular positions, signals on, locations known, following every registered protocol and galactic union, regulation exactly as they always had. Peaceful, patient, cooperative, the same as they had always appeared. The galaxy now understood him in a way it would not forget for a very long time, that appearing peaceful and being harmless were two completely different things, and that the species sitting quietly at the end of the council table, saying little, causing no trouble, following all the rules, was doing all of that because it had decided to. Because every day it made an active, deliberate choice to be the kind of civilization it wanted to be. Not because it had no other option, because it did. Because it always had. And because, as the Vreth Empire and 3 allied powers had now learned at considerable cost, when that choice was finally taken away from them, humanity remembered very clearly and very completely what the other option looked like. Humanity had never wanted to be the most feared species in the galaxy. They had wanted, for 200 years, to be the most trusted one. The galaxy had made that very difficult, and in doing so, had learned something it would carry forward into every council session, every diplomatic exchange, every military calculation for generations to come. A simple truth that should perhaps have been obvious from the very beginning. When a species that knows exactly what it is capable of chooses peace, and that the peace is not weakness, it is the most powerful thing in the universe because it can end